I don't see any questions in the chat about externalities, so must mean that you guys are all experts in externalities now. So you shall be quizzed on this game show called Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And it's time to play. For our first question, which is worth $200. Lake Nafisha helps supply 70% of the UK rose flower market. Water extraction from the lake damaged fish stocks in the area. The impact of rose production on fishermen is an example of A. Private benefits, B. Private costs, C. External costs, or D. External benefits. So decide wisely, have a think about it, and I shall give you 10 seconds to approach this question, and you can pop your answer in the chat. So I see we've got one response now. Seem to have a majority on which one is the correct answer. Okay, so 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. C. External cost. Is that the final answer? Good job. Oh, thanks for following, Frachi. Yeah, so external costs would be the answer. So let me explain. Because the fishermen are being affected as a third party. And the UK rose flower market isn't actually going to pay back the fishermen for the damage in fish stocks because of the water that they have used. So therefore, they're causing an external cost to fishermen. Yeah. And it won't be private costs because the cost on fishermen is not the cost of production for the rose, and it's not benefit, definitely, because it's a damage on fish stocks, right? Okay, for $1,000 question, or 2,000. Which one of the statements is correct regarding university education? A. It is a public good. B. It is an inferior good. C. Its marginal social benefits is greater than marginal private benefits. Or D. Its social optimum quantity is lower than its market equilibrium quantity. So this looks a bit more complicated and wordy. Will you be able to rise to the challenge? So I wonder if all of you are going to university. If you don't get this question, you aren't going. Okay, I'm kidding. If you don't get this question, you can still go to university. It's alright. So I'll give you 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, I can see C is the majority. So C, is that the correct answer? Yeah, you've got it. Oh, good job. Hey, you've switched from A to C. That's like cheating. Okay, let me explain. So A, it is a public good. So university education is not a public good because in economics, we define public good as non-rivalrous and non-excludable. Because only certain people would be able to afford a university education since they need to pay for it. Therefore, it's not a public good since it is excludable. And this means that some people won't be able to attend university. It's not an inferior good, because an inferior good means that when you when your incomes fall, you would buy more of it. So I don't think you would get a university education when your incomes are falling. So it's not an inferior good. And then C is marginal social benefits are bigger than marginal private benefits. So that would be correct, because for university education, it produces a positive consumption externality. The reason being is because if you're more educated, you can teach others, you'll be more productive for the economy, so you'll be benefiting third parties. And therefore, the social benefits of consuming university education would be higher than the private benefits. And finally, D won't be correct, because its social optimum quantity is lower than the market equilibrium quantity. So actually the market equilibrium quantity, which is the private quantity which we consume university education at, is actually lower than the social optimum quantity, because since education is a good that generates positive externalities and it's beneficial to society, society will want us to consume more. Hence, the social quantity should be greater than the market quantity. Okay. Next one. $16,000, and you still have 3 lifelines. That's impressive. Smoking cigarettes generates negative consumption externalities. This means A, private benefit from smoking includes consumption externalities. B, social benefit from smoking is negative. C, social benefit is smaller than the private benefit from smoking. Or D, social optimum level of smoking is 0. So there seems to be a few tricky options there. Is this a trick question? Again, we're starting to have a consensus. I shall give you 5 more seconds to decide between these 4 similar answers. Yeah. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. C. Is that your final answer? Good job. So, if smoking generates negative consumption externalities, it means that smoking is detrimental to society because it's affecting the third parties negatively. Therefore, society would want us to smoke less. However, we are smoking too much because the benefit that we have from smoking is higher than the benefit to society. So therefore, we would be over smoking or over consuming. So in this case, it would be C. It won't be D because the social optimum level of smoking is 0. That's not true. The social optimum level is usually not 0, right? If we think back into the diagram. So as long as there is a private benefit, the social optimum level of smoke wouldn't be 0. Social benefit from smoking is negative. So again, it won't be negative because social benefit will also include the private benefit from smoking, which is positive. So there are some private benefits gained from smoking because people like smoking. And then A, private benefit from smoking includes consumption externalities. So private benefit does not include external benefit, right? Only social benefit will include both private and external benefit. So therefore it does not include consumption externalities. Okay. $32,000. Oh, $64,000. Training provided by firms are underprovided, as benefits from training are captured by competitors when workers change jobs. How do we describe the situation? A. Positive production externality and partial market failure. B. Negative production externality and partial market failure. C. Negative production externality and missing market. Or D. Positive production externality and missing market. So you guys might not be familiar with professional training. Not a lot of companies actually offer good professional training, because of course you can just leave the company after you get trained by the company. But which answer in this case would reflect this situation? Oh, I see we've got some differences in answers here. Nice. I always like a difference. Shows some uncertainty. Okay. 3, 2, 1. Is D the correct answer? No, it's A. You won't be walking away with any money today. So the reason it's A is because the difference between A and D is whether it's a missing market or if it is a partial market failure, right? So in an externality situation, the good is still being provided, but just not at the socially optimum level. So therefore, it would be classified as partial market failure rather than a missing market. So rather than having the entire market, or rather than not having an actual market for the good. Yeah, so the good would still be there. The missing market phenomenon would be applied to public goods, where nobody would like to produce the good since anybody can use the good, and they can't get back the cost of production for the good, as there is the free rider problem. So missing markets would be related to public goods. And again, it would be a type of market failure, whereas externalities would be related to partial market failure. Okay. I'll give you another chance. You can stay on the show. $500K question. If you get $500K, you can retire when you're 30, maybe. So, what should the government do to achieve social optimum consumption of nursery places in this economic diagram? A. Implement a maximum price of 0p1 per unit. B. Tax phi t per unit. C. Subsidize RS per unit. Or D. Impose a minimum price of 0p1 per unit. This is getting hard, isn't it? This is an A2 question, year 13. Yeah, year 13 question. So we need to think about how each of the options would affect the diagram, right? And also we want to think about what type of externality this is. So I've increased the difficulty of questions since yesterday. Okay, so 5 more seconds. You've got a 25% chance of getting this correct, if you guess. Oh, okay, let's change of answer before. Oh, wow, everyone's got different answers. Okay, so we've got D as the most popular one. Stop changing around. Okay, D, is that your final answer? It's C. Let me explain. So this one is actually quite difficult. Okay, so let's look at D first. Use 50-50. It's too late. Okay, we'll use 50-50 on the next question, which is even harder. I mean, it can, yeah, probably even harder. Because, yeah, you'll see. Okay, so minimum price of 0p1 per unit. So first, let's figure out what this diagram is, right? So nursery school places is related to education. And if it's related to education, it's got to be a positive consumption externality. And how we can confirm that is because there are two demand curves here, right? So if there are two demand curves, it's got to be a consumption externality. And because society wants us to consume more, like the social curve is on the outside, then this means that it must be a positive externality because we want higher consumption. Yeah. So we can see that the social optimum consumption is at Q1 places, right? Because that's where the social curves meet at point R. So MSC equals to MSB at point R. And then we can see here that if we implement a minimum price of 0p1 per unit, then that would be saying that we're implementing a minimum price here, right? So we implement a minimum price here, then, but currently the market price is here at this point at PE, right? That's the equilibrium market price, because we know where the market is originally operating by looking at where the private equilibrium is. So we can see the private cost is equal to private benefit at this point. So this means the current market price is at PE. So if we set a minimum price at P1, you're making the good more expensive. And what happens if the good is more expensive? People would buy less, right? So to know where people would buy, we would see where this minimum price actually crosses the demand curve. So the MPB would be the demand curve. And we can see the minimum price crosses the demand curve here. So if we impose the minimum price of 0p1, we would actually be consuming even less at Q here. Yeah. So this might be a bit tricky if you're not familiar with price controls or minimum or maximum prices. You can have a look into that on the website. There's notes on the website with regards to price controls. And then if we look at the other options, so if we look at C, the correct answer. So let me just clear the markings. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so if we have a subsidy of, trying to get my pen back. Yes, if we have a subsidy of, my pen is not working. Okay. If we have a subsidy of RS per unit, then what happens is that we're going to have a subsidy of this amount, right? Ooh. So the vertical amount is like that. And as we know, the subsidy would shift the supply curve to the right because it's going to increase profits for producers. So if we shift the supply to the right by RS amount, then supply would be, it would cross through here, right? So this would be S1. So as we can see, as a result, the supply would cross the demand of MPB here at this point. Q1. Oh, not this one, sorry. Yeah, so we can see the new supply after the subsidy, which has shifted the supply out, would cross the marginal profit benefit at point S. And then because of that, we would have a quantity of Q1. And of course, since the good is being subsidized, it would also be cheaper as well. So this would be P. So the price would come down. Okay, cool. So the max price of 0p1 per unit doesn't work because the current price is lower than the maximum price. So it won't have any effect on the market. The tax of phi t per unit doesn't really help as well, because if you tax it, actually we will be consuming even less, right? So the supply would shift onto the left by phi t amount. So it would shift inwards. And as a result, again, we would have even less quantity. So yeah, all in all, a very tricky question that covers many different topics, including maximum price, taxes, and subsidies. But now, for the 1 million question. We're still at 50-50. So once the answers come out, I shall use 50-50. Okay. To improve the allocation of resources, what should the government do in this case? So we've got two products, product X and product Y, and each of them have a different amount of private benefit, external benefit, and cost to society. So either A, the government should tax X and subsidize Y. B, the government should tax X and tax Y. C, the government should subsidize X and tax Y. Or D, the government should subsidize X and subsidize Y. Oh, that was quick. But let's use 50-50. Now I can tell you it's not B or D. Because normally it's not one way anyway, right? Normally there's like one is this way and the one is the other way. Are you guys just copying each other? Sometimes I want to know how you guys got the answer. Make sure you guys have the right reasoning. Huh? Okay, everyone is saying it's A. Okay, so one way to look at this question is to calculate the benefit and cost, right? Let's see. Final answer. Is it A, tax X and subsidize Y? Good job. Okay, yeah, so one way of looking at this question is to add up the benefit and the costs, yeah? So if we have a look, you can see that the social benefit of product X is what? £250, because social benefit is when we add up the private and the external. And then the social cost for product X is £290, right? So we can see that product X is kind of like a detrimental product to society, because the cost, 290, is much higher than the social benefit. So actually we want to consume less of product X, and we want to produce less of this good, so that there would be a net welfare gain for society. Therefore we want to tax X. And then similarly, if we do the same for product Y, you can see that the total social benefit for product Y is 110, and the total social cost for product Y is 100. So we can see product Y is actually benefiting society overall, and as a result we should produce more of product Y or consume more of product Y. Therefore we want to subsidize product Y. Okay,